And so having gone through these massive documents and realizing all of this stuff, my mind is kind of a little bit blown. You might have noticed that I've been a little bit more skeptical on XRP recently, but after the news that happened last night with Citadel and Fortress investing $500 million, giving Ripple a valuation of $40 billion, instead of going out and just making content straight away on it, I wanted to actually do some deep dive research because something about this felt different. And what I found led me to believe that it was in fact different. After having done hours of deep dive research on this specific piece of news, I've come to the conclusion XRP's involvement in the new financial system is far greater than I expected. So in today's episode, I'm going to break down why Fortress and Citadel would even invest that kind of money into Ripple, what that money is actually going to enable Ripple to do, and how those actions will impact the price of XRP. The whole time, I'm going to show you the proof on screen and my logic behind my thinking. We're going to go everywhere in this episode, from Bank of International Settlements to Basel III and all kinds of stuff here. And by the end of this video, you'll see exactly why I'm shifting back towards XRP as a fundamental part of this new financial infrastructure. So the news is that Ripple has had a new injection of investment from Fortress and from Citadel. It's about $500 million worth. And that gives Ripple a valuation of $40 billion, which, by the way, is the highest valuation that Ripple has ever had. But we need to pause here because if you just accept that news for what it is, you don't really see what's actually going on. I dug a little bit deeper here, actually quite a little bit deeper, and I wanted to figure out who Fortress are and who Citadel are, because I wanted to know, is there any connection between who they are and who Ripple is and who they are together that could inform where this is all going? And I uncovered the motherlode here. So let's start with Fortress Group because they have $53 billion in assets. And what's interesting about Fortress is that they specialize in collateralisation. So this company actually provides the liquidity. So, you know, when you talk about, oh, this company needs liquidity, this company needs liquidity, the whole system needs liquidity. Well, a company like Fortress Group actually provide the liquidity, but they provide it in the form of credit, so debt. Essentially, they're giving debt to people so that they can function in the economy. And uniquely about Fortress is that they can do this while using other solid assets. You might use real estate, for example, to borrow against real estate and use that borrowed amount and give it as liquidity, kind of taking borrowed money and then lending it out to other companies. And that's how their business functions. And I realized very quickly that they're not investing in Ripple to get XRP tokens. They're investing in Ripple because they see XRP as liquidity that can generate them a yield. If they can provide XRP as the liquidity to their clients, they can increase how much money they make from their clients by just offering a better service. I've put that very basically. It goes a lot deeper than that, but let's move on to Citadel. I don't know how else to explain Citadel other than they basically run Wall Street. Every single day, Citadel is responsible for $570 billion worth of trades. Every single day. So Citadel's not in a position where they bet on the markets. They're not participating in that way. They actually are the markets. They run the markets. Whenever a trade needs to be executed on Wall Street, Citadel find the market for it. I need to buy this much of this thing and I want to sell this much of this thing. Citadel put that market together and make it happen. And if you know anything about XRP, that should fill you with an uncontrollable excitement. Because whenever you have one asset going into another asset, you need a conversion in the middle, and that is XRP. It makes complete sense in this whole setup. So together, you've got Fortress, who acts like the balance sheet power of this whole thing. You've got Citadel, who can provide liquidity, but mostly just make up this market-making infrastructure. Then you've got Ripple, who provides the interoperability and the rails for this whole system to work. Together, they form a triangle. That is the capital, the liquidity, and the settlement. And this is the foundation of programmable money, which we are moving into. And I think all three of these companies see that. So that $500 million has come into Ripple. Now, my mind immediately was, well, what are Citadel and what are Fortress actually looking for here? Why would they put such a heavy chunk of money into Ripple? As a business, you just have to see a return. So if I'm paying you this much, I need this much plus this much back to make it feel like that was a good investment for me. And so although Ripple has been valued now at $40 billion with this new investment, you have to expect that Fortress and Citadel want to see a reasonable return on that money. So it's my expectation that Citadel and Fortress would want a double my money or a little bit more back than that, because this is a very heavy investment and needs to be remunerated as such. And I think Fortress and Citadel would only be involved if Ripple was going to see an $80 to $100 billion valuation down the line. And I think that's very reasonable to assume. So I say that to say that Citadel and Fortress have made an investment here with the acknowledgement that things will only grow. These aren't companies that guess. These guys know where things are going, and they've put $500 million into Ripple. That means there must be a series of ways that Ripple is going to use that money that's going to grow the business for Ripple and therefore grow the business of Fortress and Citadel. Logical thinking, linear thinking. Everyone on board? Yes, if you are on board, click the like button on this video. So in my mind, there are 4 different ways that money is going to be used by Ripple in order to expand Ripple's business and therefore create enough of a yield, a return on investment for Fortress and Citadel. They are going to benefit in multiple ways, but Ripple is really only going to use this money in 4 different ways. The first way is corridor expansion. So think about it like this. If there's a new payment corridor that Ripple want to access, this is, a payment corridor between the UK and Somalia, for example, developing those relationships and setting up each country to abide by the legislation and laws and regulations that exist specifically between that corridor, those 2 countries, that's going to cost money. There's also a whole load of onboarding costs. So they're going to use that money to help the bank in Somalia, for example, set this all up, train their banks, train the whole system, run the tests and get it started. All of that comes at a cost. So there's going to be money for that. And I always like to think of money as energy. So when you've got more of this energy, you can get things done faster. If you've got more energy, you can run faster, you can do everything faster with more energy. Money is just adding a fuel to the energy side of this and getting things done faster. So we're going to see more payment corridors and we're going to see them develop faster. Now, the second one's really interesting because I think we're going to see Ripple in a position here to provide liquidity with that money. So what do I mean? So let's talk about Fortress, for example. Fortress will have a whole load of clients that will need liquidity, right? That's the whole point of Fortress. They provide that liquidity. So some companies are really going to need liquidity and they're going to need it fast. And so Fortress, through Ripple, would likely do something that goes in accordance with Ripple's line of credit service. This is where Ripple can actually provide XRP as liquidity to a client so that they can use that XRP to facilitate whatever they're trying to do with payments. So what this means is that Ripple give that XRP, they either take it off the exchanges, so buy it on the secondary market and send it over to these companies as liquidity, or they use it from their own reserves using their line of credit service. And this is something that has been done before. If we go back to 2020 in the SEC filings, this is a 10K that you're looking at on screen. You can see that in this MoneyGram SEC filing, it shows very clearly that Ripple actually provided XRP to MoneyGram so that they could facilitate kind of this liquidity move. So there is precedent for this happening as well. And I want to add, this doesn't encroach on any securities law. So nothing's changed about this based on the lawsuit results. If you're providing line of credit services or credit or debt, and you're offering that as liquidity, so it's not classified as a security, just in case you thought any of that could get in the way. Ripple will also use some of that money to establish like a tooling is what they call it basically. So establish custody for these new moves, a treasury perhaps, and maybe some credit systems as well. And these are things that all these banks can actually use for this service. And I also think Ripple are going to use this money for capital market pilots. I really think it helps them to start moving into tokenized assets in a big way. Even if it's just the pilot phase at this stage, I think this money frees up the ability to do that as well. So that $500 million, it's going to go somewhere. I think it's going to go to, if not all of those 4, but some of those 4. But there's a really important thing I want to bring up here. And that is when we're talking about XRP and we're talking about Ripple, yes, it's exciting to see the whole financial system change. But what we really, if we're truly honest, we want to know, how does XRP's price go up? There are 2 different factors that play a role in the price of XRP. I think everyone is hedged on the side of, oh, if XRP is getting used, then that's brilliant and the price is going to go up. And that is accurate, but it's not the full story. And in fact, it's not even the exciting part. So what I think you have is usage, so XRP being used, and then you have what's called effective float. Effective float is the amount of XRP that's actually remaining out there for people to buy on the market. What you have is usage, which I believe impacts the price of XRP to a minimal degree. And when I say minimal, I'm saying like with this usage, I see XRP's price maybe going to $6 or something. Like it's not madness, it's not crazy. It's nice, but it's not crazy. Reducing the effective float, that is the real price driver, because if you can take XRP out of circulation, you have less XRP to be used. And so the price goes up. That's simple supply and demand dynamics. So the big question we have is this capital into Ripple enough to create a reduction in the effective float? In other words, can this money that's come in, this $500 million, is it enough to increase the price of XRP significantly? That's what we're going to get into. Because when we look at effective float, there are actually 7 mechanisms that can increase the price of an asset. But really, there are only 3 that, as part of this partnership, are actually going to come into play. So I'm just going to cover the 3. And the first of those 3 is when Ripple are actually giving XRP out to their clients via Fortress, for example, and saying, here's the liquidity to do these deals. Or let's say, for example, oh, Citadel, let's give you all of this XRP, because when you're facilitating these trades, and on Wall Street, by the way, the hundreds of billions of dollars a day, it's crazy actually, I think about it. You want to move from this stock into this stock, or buy this currency into this stock, whatever it is in Wall Street, we're going to give you all of this XRP so that you have the liquidity to do that faster than you currently can do it. How much XRP would be required as liquidity for Citadel to move hundreds of billions of dollars of trades every single day? A lot. It's crazy. So I think you've got this Ripple's line of credit thing where they're giving XRP out just on the short term to say, here, have this XRP for your liquidity. But then there's also the precedent that we've got from MoneyGram that they've actually done this before. So it is a real thing. Ripple's line of credit is actually a service that they offer that came out in 2020. The likes of Citadel doing these hundreds of billions of dollars in trades every single day, literally making markets, meaning turning asset into a different asset, needs XRP. For me, this partner liquidity kind of offering that Ripple can offer in this triangle is extremely powerful, and this is going to be one of the things that impacts the price of XRP moving forward. Secondly, we've got something called the minimum balances and buffers, and all of this has been set up by the likes of Basel and the Bank of International Frameworks. They've talked about this extensively. They've hid it under all of the financial jargon and language, so it's incredibly difficult to read and stuff, but I've put it all together here for you. It basically says that a bank must ensure that it has sufficient intraday liquidity to meet its obligations under both normal and stress conditions. It also says the service level agreement includes legally validated provisions that ensure availability of funds, blah, 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 preferably intraday or in real time. And what it's saying is that international banking standards, this is what they all have to follow, means they are required to have pre-funded liquidity buffers. So they have to have the assets as liquidity before they encounter the difficulty. Meaning they have to have crypto, XRP for example, sat idle in the bank waiting for these things for trades to happen. There has to be pre-funded. And when things are pre-funded and sat idle, you are reducing the effective float, meaning you're taking XRP out of circulation and increasing the price of XRP. But then there's a third mechanism that also increases the price of XRP or reduces the effective float, and that is regulatory segregation. Then we have an industry letter from NYDFS 2025, and it says this: a company must at all times maintain virtual currency of the same type and amount as that which it owes each customer, and must segregate and separately account for such customer virtual currency. Reiterating that if you have XRP sitting in a licensed custodian, so someone holding that XRP that's licensed for a specific corridor, a specific payment corridor as liquidity, I know there's a lot of words here, I'm sorry, but I'm trying to make sense of it all as well. It is legally frozen for that purpose. It cannot be used for any other reason. So if I want to send money from the UK, I'm the UK bank, and I'm trying to send to the Bank of Somalia. I keep using that example. If I need liquidity for that payment corridor, I must not only have that liquidity beforehand, pre-allocated, but it must not also be used for any other corridor, any other payment. It must sit there idle and be frozen without being used for anything else. Meaning every payment corridor, every trading corridor, every moment where you need something to exchange into another thing, there has to be liquidity held. There are buffers, there are legal requirements for how much liquidity you must hold for each one of those. And we're talking hundreds, if not millions of these different combinations that will require specifically the crypto to be held frozen there for that specific use case and not intermingled with any other trade or any other country or any other bank or any other corridor. It's wild. And this is why research is so important, because if you don't know the standards for banking, intraday liquidity and all of that stuff, you don't get the scale of this, because you just resort to the thought of, oh, XRP will be used. Yeah, it'll just be XRP. Yeah, but why? Why is it XRP? Or why would they take the XRP out of circulation? And why would it be held? We have to know these things. I guess you don't necessarily have to, but for me, it's very exciting. And so having gone through these massive documents and realizing all of this stuff, my mind is kind of a little bit blown. So those are the three mechanisms by which I think the price of XRP will increase as a result of this partnership. So let's talk about my shift in mentality about XRP, because previously it was very gung-ho XRP, but I'd done my research, but clearly not as deep as I have just now. And I'd done my research, it was very exciting. I then realized a shift, a change in the room. There's like a feeling in the room, an atmosphere that changed. And that atmosphere was the big boys walked into the room, and those big boys were the stablecoins. They changed the environment of the way I was viewing XRP. And stablecoins, I think, will be doing payments at a massive scale. But there's one massive flaw about stablecoins, is that everybody wants their own. And when you say not everyone wants their own stablecoin, you can just use the common stablecoins. No, well, there's actually two types of stablecoins. There are stablecoins and there are CBDCs. CBDCs are effectively programmed versions of stablecoins. So they're actually the same thing, CBDCs and stablecoins. So every country is going to be working towards having two different types of stablecoins, two CBDCs. That would be the retail CBDC, the one you and I will use sending money to each other. Then you've got the wholesale CBDC, which the banks will use between each other. We've got the likes of Hong Kong and Brazil, which we covered in yesterday's episode, already exchanging between their CBDCs. Lots of CBDC conversations happening right now. But what I came to realize in working through all of this and having that realization about Citadel and the fact that they do hundreds of billions of dollars every single day in these different trades, these trades inherently, by nature, are converting an asset into another asset. It made me realize, if I'm any CBDC, any country, sending into another country, that country wants to receive their own CBDC. There is a conversion process that must take place. Now, how much of the world's payments that will go around will be, one for one? Because this is where my brain was with stablecoins. They're just going to convert one-to-one USDT into USDT. And that might be the case. But every country will have their own CBDC, and every CBDC will not be the same. In fact, each one will be different. If they are different, just like Citadel, they will require a conversion process in between. Yes, they will receive their CBDC that they want. Yes, they will send the CBDC that they want to send. But in the middle, there must be a conversion moment in time. Now, that data will be drawn from the likes of Chainlink, for example, who are heavily involved in this Brazil into Hong Kong CBDC exchange. Chainlink were there as the oracle, determining, what the price was and the conversion rates and all of that stuff. But even still, they're not settling the payment. You need a conversion asset in the middle. And I see no reason why this cannot be XRP. So when you look at all the case for all the different payments that happen all around the world, how many of them, the real question is, how many of them are going to be like for like conversions or trades, let's say? So the exact same CBDC into the exact same CBDC, or the exact same stablecoin into the exact same stablecoin, versus how many of these transactions will need a conversion process. And I tend to think that the conversion process is required in the majority of these transfers. After all this research, this big realization moment, that is now where I stand. Now, I don't know what the short term looks like for XRP. It's extremely unknown right now. But what I do know is if you look on screen right now, this is the whole scale of CBDC moves, everything in global finance that we cover on this channel as part of the macro. This is a very special episode, which is a deep dive research into one topic. But typically we cover that day or the last couple of days, really important news, break it down for you so that we can build this portfolio that's not just XRP, although you might feel like that's all you want to do, but is also all the companies and all the other cryptos like Chainlink, all that make up this whole ecosystem for the economy at large and at scale, making sure we capitalize on this in an inevitable way. And that's why I've called it the inevitable portfolio. If you want to participate in the growth of that portfolio and the development of that portfolio with research just like this, I urge you to subscribe to this channel. And if you're interested in actually installing this portfolio that we're building that you can see on screen here, then there's two ways that you might want to do it. If you're really particular about the crypto and actually owning the specific crypto, I would advise that you go over to Caleb and Brown to buy all of the cryptos on the inevitable portfolio list. If you're not that interested in the crypto in that way and you're okay holding a representation of that crypto, but you also want to invest in the companies and the ETFs and stuff that are part of this portfolio, you want to go over to eToro. eToro allow you to invest in these companies, buy shares. It's basically a share purchasing platform. You can also buy representations of the crypto in eToro, but if you're precious about holding the actual crypto, you might want to do that on Caleb and Brown. So the links for both of those are below. In fact, in the next couple of days, I'm going to send out a newsletter with this entire portfolio kind of updated. The last email I sent out got so many responses, and many of them, I'll show an example on screen, said this is the best email they've ever received. So I want to send you every edition of that every single week whenever this portfolio develops and we continue to build it. And we're reacting to the absolute cutting edge of global finance, as I hope I've showed in this video. So with all of that said, subscribe to this channel. We'll be back very shortly with updates to this news and the developments of Ripple and the global macro economy as well. This has been The Macro. Stay emotionless. I'll see you in the next one.